During the last decade, at least 350 journalists have been killed in Latin America, and many more have disappeared. In most cases, no one has been punished. In an era where press freedom is challenged more than ever before, the countries in the region are forced to confront their different phases of censorship. Mexico and Colombia are considered amongst the most dangerous places for journalists in the world.
There is a high risk linked to the organized crime, linked to paramilitaries, linked to drug trafficking, and so the coverage, of course, is very risky in many countries, such as Mexico.
Venezuela is exporting a paradox democracy to Ecuador and Bolivia, while in Argentina, the government is using advertising contracts to reward media companies. President Lobo in Honduras is tightening the laws concerning news stations, while local courts in Brazil are censoring journalists.
I think when a leader feels him or herself to be threatened, then we tend to see a deterioration in media freedoms. We've certainly seen that in Venezuela, as I mentioned, with Hugo Chavez. He feels himself increasingly under threat, allowed the opposition television station to run for a certain amount of time, and then put increasing pressure on them.
No habrá nueva concesión para ese canal golpista de televisión que se llamó Radio Caracas Televisión.
5 months after this announcement, on the 27th of May 2007, Radio Caracas Televisión, the most popular and one of the oldest private media outlets in Venezuela, stopped transmitting. For the government's opposition, the case of RCTV was an invasion of civil rights.
Al cerrar Radio Caracas nos quitan la vida.
Que me acabaron mis novelas. Y he crecido con RCTV. Mis hijos crecieron con RCTV y mis nietos están creciendo con RCTV.
But for the supporters of Chavez, it was simply the end of a TV license. At the headquarters of the TV station, 5,000 enraged employees were struggling to fight off their tears. RCTV was told to give its airways to a new channel, Venezuelan Social TV, without even considering any legal remedies.
Nos están colocando una mordaza roja que el mundo se tiene que enterar cómo nos quieren dejar amordazados, así.
El gobierno no está conforme con lo que se dice a través de este micrófono, a través de estas pantallas, porque se dice la verdad.
2 months later, RCTV was transformed into an international TV channel and started to transmit by satellite. But in January 2010, a new retrospective law suspended the license again.
Y nosotros podemos monitorear que RCTV Internacional siga al aire. Así que vamos a estar muy pendientes de esta señal. A continuación,
new attempts have been made by RCTV owners to open 2 different channels accepting the government's rules, but both had been rejected. At this moment, RCTV has lost more than 4,000 employees and it is transmitting only one edition of their newsdays via internet and to a Colombian partner, Caracol Televisión. The situation in Venezuela is not only about media closure or aggression against journalists. More recently, the government started considering internet as a threat to its stability. For the first time in the nation's history, a law will regulate the flow of information. Social networking sites, forums, and official media outlets will all be subject to censorship. Curiously, Chavez first announced the signing of this decision through his Twitter account. In 2010, Reporters Without Borders research of 178 countries ranked Venezuela as the 39th worst country for press freedom, although terrorism and violence has taken its neighbor even further up that list.
Yeah, I was in Colombia last year and it is a very dramatic situation. During the mission that we made, it appeared that there was a strong link between the former paramilitaries and the intelligence services. So you imagine the risk for the civil society and press freedom.
Journalists in Colombia have been the target of right-wing paramilitary groups, Marxist guerrillas, and drug cartels for the past 20 years. In November 2010, Colombian reporter Ginette Bedoya was threatened by the guerrillas of the FARC after the presentation of her book based on their leader Mono Jojoy. Ginette Bedoya, journalist or military intelligence agent? This was the headline question issued by the Noticias Nueva Colombia news agency that is aligned with the FARC.
Decir que no siento miedo sería una mentira. Cuando uno ve en una página de un grupo que es catalogado como terrorista, como las FARC, pues obviamente que se siente miedo.
Ginette has repeatedly been the target of death threats after reporting on the armed conflict.
Hace 10 años, un grupo, al parecer de paramilitares, me secuestró cuando estaba haciendo un trabajo periodístico. Fui agredida físicamente, torturada, violada.
11 years have passed since Bedoya's assault, but no one has been detained.
Las garantías para la prensa, digamos que se limitan simplemente a la denuncia, porque los procesos judiciales en el 90% no tienen éxito.
Similar situations have been registered in Venezuela, where impunity prevails and freedom of speech is becoming even more restricted.
Lo que está haciendo Chávez, pues no hay quien lo frene. Es el mismo hecho, es las mismas medidas, son las mismas denuncias, son las mismas organizaciones haciendo eco de lo que está ocurriendo, pero sin embargo no hay alguien que pueda frenar los abusos que se están cometiendo contra los canales y contra las emisoras y contra las frecuencias que Chávez quiere cerrar.
Until 2004, Colombia was the second most dangerous country in the world for journalists, before being replaced by Mexico.
And we're seeing a very similar situation developed in Mexico in the last few years, where the narco traffickers are in many ways undermining the very pillars of their society by paying off or killing the people in the police, in the judiciary, and increasingly journalists.
Armando Rodriguez El Choco, a Mexican journalist, was assassinated in his car on November 13, 2008. He was taking his daughter to school when the murderers shot him. His case has not been solved yet, but the crime is believed to be linked to drug trafficking and corruption. Armando was a reporter working for the newspaper El Diario in Ciudad Juárez, one of the most dangerous areas in the country. His death, unfortunately, is not an exceptional case.
Sé que esta respuesta va a sonar horrible, pero me suena a cualquier caso. O sea, eso pasa todo el tiempo. Todo el tiempo tenemos notas de alguien que iba con su hijo y lo mataron.
In 2010, 9 journalists have been killed in Mexico and 3 have disappeared.
La libertad de expresión la tenemos. Es un derecho constitucional, tenemos leyes que la defienden. Nadie te dice no publiques. El problema es, publicas y te amenazan, publicas y te matan, publicas y atentan contra ti, contra tu material, contra tu familia, contra tu medio. Entonces, pues, está muy bonita, ¿no?, en nuestra Constitución, pero no existe la garantía de que ese derecho lo puedas ejercer sin que se lleve tu vida.
According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, 90% of these crimes are not solved. 2.5 years after Armando's death, his widow and colleagues are still suing for justice.
Hasta el momento no hay resultado acerca de quién mató a Choco o quién lo mandó matar.
The situation in the country has not improved. The Journal's 21-year-old cameraman Luis Carlos Santiago was murdered on the 16th of September last year. Appalled by this situation, El Diario published a letter in an effort to find out what the drug cartels actually wanted from it. We, journalists, want you to explain what you want from us, what you want us to publish and not publish, to know what we should expect. Unfortunately, in many Mexican cases, there is just one solution: self-censorship. Just this year, Noroeste and Vanguardia, after being forced to face similar situations, have decided to stop covering drug crime issues. Killing or gagging a journalist removes a vital witness to events and threatens the right of us to be informed. From governments to drug dealers, the press in Latin America is being attacked more than ever. There have been memories of reporters doing work in the region that prompted the spirit of democracy. People there are now forced to witness a rapid transition to open hostility towards the media, but they are prepared to defend their rights.
It's essential to fight for press freedom, simply because press freedom is one of the basic pillars, I believe, of a free and fair democracy. Without press freedom, you simply begin to undermine democracy.